on to talk a little bit about strategic CSI and what we mean by that. Strategic CSI simply means CSI where there is a benefit for both society or development purposes as well as for the business. So it's that sweet spot where the money is invested and there's returns for society and for the business. And in order for this to happen, the CSI needs to be aligned to the business in some way. And companies do align their CSI to the business in a number of ways. The most kind of obvious way is around geography, and that's where we see a lot of the mining houses aligning their CSI. So Nick's already touched on that, but supporting the communities around which they operate. And obviously that's a strategic thing to do, and we can see the impact of unhappy societies are playing out at the moment. And that's a theme that will be explored in one of our breakaway streams. But there's other ways of aligning CSI to the business as well. One of those is around core competency, or the products and services that a company offers. So if a company can apply its products and services to a development field and do things that other corporates can't do, this is going to achieve more developmental impact, but also more benefit for the company in terms of the returns it gets through applying its products, through employee volunteering, through its reputation benefits, any number of benefits. And we see examples here of telecommunication companies using their mobile networks and platforms to help with development projects. We see it with health companies using their expertise and skills to train doctors and nurses. There's numerous examples there. Other ways of aligning CSI to your business are to use a kind of stakeholder approach. And here we see companies who are keen to work with stakeholders, be it government or their large suppliers or customers. And one of the big business benefits coming out of this approach is obviously improved relationships with your stakeholders. So I think there's a number of ways that companies can think about their CSI. And I think, I know there's a lot of non-profits in the room, and I think it's important for non-profits to also think very carefully about this concept of strategic CSI, and to think about how your project, program, or brand can actually be of benefit to the corporates or the donor partners that you work with, and to go to them with suggestions of how you could use their assets or their skills or some of their staff and volunteering programs, how they can use your brand, to think about what is that win-win situation where it's not simply a check-writing incident. It's a much deeper relationship that has much wider benefits for both sides of the transaction. So taking that graph just one step further, we've got our matrix. I'm sure many of you have seen this before. And what we've done is plotted what we think are some various approaches to CSI onto this chart. And again, you can see corporate benefit along the bottom axis and social or developmental benefit across the top. And strategic CSI is that sweet spot where both of these are achieved and kind of maximized. And I'll just encourage all of you to look at this graph for a minute and try to place your own organizations and your own projects and programs on this chart. So we find on the left-hand side the grant-making charitable donation. These are typically more reactive. They can be well structured and have a number of criteria, but it's often difficult to measure, being more reactive, it's often difficult to measure the developmental impact. Social investment is where a company has very specific development objectives and indicators and defines all those up front and typically invests in fewer projects and does track that. But there's less of an attempt to link that to the corporate benefit. Social leadership is where companies really play a role in developing new kind of models, testing these, sharing these with the sector, be that the government or other donors. So, I mean, for both non-profits and corporates, I think it's worth looking at this and placing your various projects and programs on it, and placing your relationships with each other on this. So, you know, in which of your relationships have you really developed a more strategic CSI approach, where it goes beyond just money, and it leverages off both of the organizations and creates benefit for both of the organizations. And this is a theme that I'd like you to just bear in mind for the duration of the conference, because we'll be introduced, you know, what we're hoping to do is introduce a lot of the new thinking and the new approaches, and to encourage corporates and non-profits to become more strategic in their relationships and in their corporate social investment. We're definitely seeing a shift and a trend towards more strategic CSI. So whereas it used to be considered a cost and something quite separate, I think now it's increasingly being thought of as an investment, as the name implies, but an investment where there's a return both for the business and for development. And we believe there should be a return for the business. We've seen that it's moved from being really a separate function to one where the boundaries are a lot more blurred. It's very much integrated into the sustainability strategies of the organization. It's often a blurred boundaries with ED, sustainability, and it's incorporated into the strategic thinking of the organization. We're seeing that shift starting to happen, particularly with the advent of the Social and Ethics Committee. CSI has been elevated to a board level, and we're seeing the move towards more strategic and integrated CSI. Whereas the next point speaks to the fact that whereas we used to see a lot of kind of external foundations and trusts set up to manage CSI, we're increasingly seeing CSI being more internal to the business with a stronger corporate influence. So whereas it was often run by a set of external trustees, we've seen a move towards more internal department-run corporate social investment. I've spoken to the next point about alignment and that shift that we're seeing as companies move to align their CSI programs with the business, be that in terms of geography, core competency, product, skills, whatever it might be. Also that shift from reactive to proactive. So corporate proactively identifying what do they want to achieve, what can they contribute, what types of programs are they going for, and then going out there to work with their partners or to identify partners to work with. We've also seen a shift, and it's actually one of the conference themes, towards more monitoring and evaluation. And I think we'll be exploring this in the conference, and it is a topic that's always talked about, and we're definitely seeing an improvement in that, and there are some new approaches that we're hoping to introduce during this conference. As I've mentioned before, we see that it's moved from mostly financial and cash giving to the inclusion of products, assets, and employee time and skills. We've also seen the move to increase transparency. So when we first started tracking, companies were reluctant to even disclose the total amount that they were giving in a year. And we've really seen that shift in transparency and in the use of CSI in marketing and communication. Companies are recognizing that it can be a valuable part of their communication package, and it can communicate a lot about the values of the company. We've obviously seen the introduction of the BEE codes as well as the various sector charters, so it's moved from being more of a voluntary initiative to something that is recognized in a regulatory framework. And we've also seen a shift, and this is another theme that we will talk about through the conference, but from very little collaboration and kind of separate reactive projects to an attempt at more collaboration. And one of the case studies that we'll be looking at in this conference is the Partnership for Improved Learner Outcomes, which is just one effort at a large partnership collaborative initiative around education. So we've certainly seen more talk and more effort at partnerships and collaboration. Okay, so I hope that that's set the scene for the conference and provided you with some of the big numbers and what we're talking about when we talk about corporate social investment. as well as to just put a framework in place that you can think about through the conference in terms of how strategic your CSI and your relationships are. Thank you.